Over the past several months, it has been my pleasure to get to know the World Bank CEO, Kristalina Georgieva. Since then, my admiration for her has only grown. Previously, Kristalina helped shape the agenda of the European Union as Commissioner for International Cooperation, Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Response. In fact, she tripled the amount of funding for the refugee crisis in Europe. As the co-chair of the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on humanitarian financing, she has championed a more effective system to meet the needs of vulnerable people. I can tell you from personal experience that she brings the same commitment and energy to gender equality. Please welcome Madame Kristalina Georgieva.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Je comprends français très bien, mais je ne parle pas français très bien. Mon vocabulaire est limité. J'ai cherché pour une phrase simple mais signifique en français, et voilà. Bon anniversaire, cher Canada. It is always a pleasure, but it is particularly a great honor to be with you on the year of anniversary of Canada. Because in a relatively short history, compared to the country I come from, we were born as a country in 689, you have achieved so much, and you have given hope to so many with the work you do. I would like to start from the words of your Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chrystia Freeman. She recently spoke to your Parliament, starting with the question, is Canada an essential country at this time at the life of our planet? And she gave a beautiful answer that, if you sum it in one word, is yes. And what I want to do today is to reinforce this answer from the perspective of a development organization. We are at a time in history when we need more Canada in this world. First, we need your compassion. Yes, we have been successful as a world community to improve together the lives of billions of people. You go back in 1981, and at that time, 42% of the population of our planet was destitute. Out of 4.5 billion people, 1.9 billion, astonishingly big number, lived in poverty. Today, we can proudly say that the number of people in extreme poverty has shrunk to somewhere around 10% of the world population, some 800 million people. And at the same time, we have gotten up to 7.3 billion. So there are 4 billion people that are not poor with us today. But if you are one of the 800 million that lives in poverty today, is that good enough? And it is very clear the answer is no. And this is why I want to start by talking about not our successes, because yes, we can be proud of them, but talk about what is the road still to travel. And concentrate your attention, our attention, to the places where extreme poverty, unfortunately, is not going down, it is going up. In 12 countries, the percentage of people living in extreme poverty has jumped over the last decade. In 18 countries, the number of people in extreme poverty has grown by more than 500,000. The question we need to ask ourselves is why? And what is it we can do about it? When we look at the reasons why in so many places poverty is on the rise, there are 4 reasons. The first and most dramatic and most shameful for us as a world community are wars, conflicts that tear communities apart. In Syria, a country that used to be a middle-income country, 6 out of 10 people today live in poverty. 5.1 million not in their home country. South Sudan, the newest country to be born, has seen, because of war, the percentage of people in extreme poverty jumping from 45 to 71% of children, men, and women. And when we look at the face of conflict, it has become uglier. In so many places, those who fight have no interest whatsoever to become governments. They don't aspire to come to Ottawa and meet with the minister or with this audience. They aspire to create havoc, fear, desperation to their own people and to the rest of us. The second reason, actually I should say that 80% of people in humanitarian emergencies, this is 126 million people, are destitute because of conflict. The second reason is mismanagement. Governments are not the solution, they are the problem. You take Zimbabwe, where there is no reason for people to live in poverty, but they do. Or take countries where decisions taken by governments have been actually not very good decisions, to rely excessively on on their endowment, like Cameroon or Zambia. So you have a drop in the prices of oil or minerals, and the country goes from well-off to poor. And of course, we have cases like Haiti, where it has been generations of poor leaders that have driven people in misery. When I was Commissioner of Humanitarian Aid, I went to Haiti in 2010 after the earthquake. I went around, and after the first day, what I thought was, as horrible the earthquake was, it wasn't Haiti's biggest problem. Haiti's biggest problem, Papa Doc, Baby Doc, and all that has followed. And there is an interesting story when I was asking people in Haiti what we should do. Every single one, in one way or another, would say, don't give any money to the government. My colleague David, 3 years later, when we were on our way back to Haiti, in New York, in a taxi, with a taxi driver happening to be Haitian, mentions that we are going to Haiti to help, and the taxi driver says, don't give any money to the government. When you have a situation when institutions are failing people day in, day out, this is not something we can turn a blind eye to. The third reason extreme poverty is growing is population growth. I was actually amazed when I looked at the numbers how much of the shot up in poverty comes from the mere fact that some countries are overwhelmed by growth of their population. Once I had to speak to an audience in Africa about the way we can deal with the problems and escape poverty, and I was seeking for a nice, polite way to talk about population growth, and actually I found it, and it is the following. In 1960, my country, Bulgaria, and Kenya were next to each other in the population table of the world. Kenya had 8.1 million people. Bulgaria had 7.9. Today, Bulgaria has 7.2 million, so we have a demographic problem of our own. Kenya has 44 million people. So I stood up in front of this conference and I said something very simple. I cannot imagine my country coping with 44 million people. So it's simply impossible. I cannot imagine it. But why is it that we shy away of talking about family planning when country after country, whether it is Niger or it is Mali or it is Yemen, is striving to grow? So they get 3% growth and get 3.2% population growth. Where does that lead the country? So I am very grateful for our collaboration with the Global Financing Facility. We have to build it up because it is a major factor that deprives people from the chance to have better opportunities. The fourth reason, and the fourth reason is heartbreaking because we just saw it dramatically in the Caribbean, natural disasters. They can wipe out the achievements in a country in a flash. Dominica just lost 200% GDP because of Maria. And when we look at the impact of natural disasters, frankly, who is to say that rich countries won't be among those dropping dramatically down in their prosperity because of climate change upon us? So what can we do? Obviously, we believe in the bank that we have to speak loud and clear about the fact that in this rich world of ours, $78 trillion world, there ought to be a way to tackle the reasons that make it possible for people to be destitute. And we believe from the side of the World Bank that yes, we have to concentrate our attention and our financial resources where people are left furthest behind. We have raised our funding for the poor, the International Development Association. Every 3 years we go to our members and we ask for money for the most in need. And this time around, we got record high, $75 billion. The previous replenishment was $50 billion. And I want to thank Canada for being the 6th largest donor to IDA. But this money would only make a difference if we focus on communities and countries and we build up from the bottom and then we build from the top capacity. And it is not so difficult. I mean, you look at countries, how do they become rich? Take Sweden, used to be poor. Finland, used to be very poor. South Korea, very poor. What is it that makes countries leap up Well, educating their people, making sure there is infrastructure, and today we also need digital infrastructure, and also making sure that there are institutions, rule of law, that make the countries function. So we have to work together to achieve this where it doesn't exist today. We also have to recognize that, how was the movie, The Wizard of Oz? We are not in Kansas anymore. We have to recognize that our world may be richer, but it is also more fragile. Crises are more frequent, they're more severe, and they're not polite. It used to be in the 70s that there would be a crisis, we all mobilize and we fight it and it goes away, and then the next crisis comes. Now crises overlay, as it happens with conflicts and natural disasters and political crises, financial crises, all going over. So we have to be more resilient, and building resilience for those that are most destitute ought to be a priority. We have to act early, and we have to target the most vulnerable. And that, the most important message I want to leave with you, and we have to be there. We have to be there when the problems become. We have to be there when the problems deepen. We have to be there when they are resolved, and we have to still stay there. And this is something I talked to the young leaders this morning, worries me, that we have a yo-yo tendency in the development world. You know, there is a crisis, we rush, things get a little better, and we are nowhere to be seen until the next crisis hits. That has to be history. The second reason we need Canada is for your feminist development policy. We need you for your commitment to gender equality. So it is everywhere, and it is sticking. I listened to your Prime Minister in New York. He spoke at the goalkeepers, and he said, I'm proud to be a feminist. So in this world, when you hear something that impresses you, you immediately tweet, right? I did the same. So what did I tweet? It was great to hear it from a man. And I want to now talk, we need he for she, but I also want to talk to the women in the audience, because we also need she for she. And I would admit to you, for many years, for decades in my life, I thought that we have to be gender blind. You're either good or you're not, doesn't matter, man, woman. So I came in old age to be a feminist, and a very determined one, I can tell you. That is for sure, because we have a major gender gap that leads to tremendous loss for the women, of course, but also for the men, for the communities. You empower women, you have an anchor. You empower women, you have honesty. You have integrity, you have consensus building, you have productivity. And do we need this thing today? Of course we do. So thank you, Canada, for your feminist development policy. Make it infectious. Go around and get everybody to join. We are missing between $12 and $28 billion because of the gender gap in this world. And you're talking about $7 billion we need, trillion dollars. You talk about $7 trillion we need to meet the SDGs. So hey, empower women, it is done. And we need you. And we need you, Canada, for what the minister so correctly said, your ability to bring people together on global issues. On the top of my list, on the top of the list of many, is climate change. Climate change is going to push another 100 million people in extreme poverty by 2030, or maybe more. We are the first generation to experience the impact of climate change. We are the last generation that can do something about it. You have mobilized the world on the Montreal Protocol to close the ozone hole. So you have the experience. You have done it before. Yes, it was a smaller problem, I admit. But yes, we can do it. We can do it, and we ought to do it today. And what I would plead with you, Canada, is you recognize that mitigating, very important, has to continue. But the climate train has left the station. We ought to adapt. Please work on making adaptation to climate change equally significant in global development cooperation, because today it is not. Let me finish by reminding us something that has been so frequently said about the ways in which we can solve the world's problems. You heard the story? What is the way to resolve? What are the ways? 2 ways to solve the problems of our world. Have you heard it? Well, one is realistic, and the other one is fantastic. The realistic way is extraterrestrials would come from space, take over our affairs, and fix everything that needs to be fixed. The fantastic is we people would do it ourselves. But now enters Canada, and you would make that way of us sorting out our affairs possible, because you're positive, you're committed, you have a smarts to do it, the innovations that are necessary, you have the heart to do it, and you Canadians also have guts. So all the power to you, and thank you.